Welcome to Pixels and Paragraphs, the bonus show where you get to hear me, Darren Hupke, interview some of the raddest writers behind the greatest gaming books. Each episode, you get to hear from a new guest as they discuss their book, talk about their process, share some details from behind the keys, and more. Whether you're a fan of the book already or want to find something new to read, be sure to check out the show notes for links to everything we discussed today. And also, check out all the other great shows on the Soundstone Network. All right. Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Pixels and Paragraphs, the podcast about video game books. My silly spin-off of my typical podcast show where we don't talk about electronic things. We talk about paper and pulp and physical bound and printed books. I have a new guest, an exciting guest to have on the show, another writer of one of the wonderful, highly produced and visually amazing Lost in Cult books. But I have Ashley Schofield from the writer of the new Valhalla Design Works book coming from Lost in Cult. Hello, Ashley. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm going to really annoy you as I annoy every single podcast host because it's an understandable mistake. My name is Schofield with a hard C, and I do not blame you because it is 100% looks like it reads with a soft C and the H. I don't blame you at all, but it's just really funny. Like every single podcast I've been on has had some kind of small bit of like, yeah, that's not quite how that is.
Yeah, I should have asked you beforehand.
I curse my parents.
Yeah, I should have asked you before. I have a silly last name, Hupke, and when people read that, they're like, you know, like if they don't ask me beforehand, I will also have to do the same thing where it's like, it's not Hupke, it's not Hipke, it's Hupke, but yeah, it's fine. I definitely should have clarified. So, okay, there we go. Proper pronunciation there for all of you listeners. If you ever meet or chat with Ashley, you can get it right when you meet. But how are you? Thank you for joining me. Thank you for jumping on and being a part of this conversation. It would be really odd for me to talk about this by myself, but how are you doing today?
I'm good. I have, it's funny because I'd love to tell you like, I've been hard at work talking about the thing we're going to talk about for half an hour. But because the book has been done for a while and is now in the final stages before being released and shipped out and everything, I'm doing a bunch of other different shit. So at the moment I'm like between occasional features. I've got like some reviews that I've done and I've got left to do. God forbid I am writing a visual novel because I've got into the apparent pipeline of games writer brackets journalist to games writer brackets dev. So yeah, I have a lot of shit that I'm trying to do, and whether I achieve all of it in time is up to me and also up to God. And yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I'm still doing shit before my book comes out, essentially.
Staying busy. I mean, you can't just sit there with a finished manuscript for it and wait on that to happen before you move on to the next thing. You just got to stay busy.
I cannot rest on my laurels. No, I gotta earn money and stay relevant.
Well, let's do some introductions. I know that you've written for a lot of like cool places and cool spots like online. You can find things written by you like on Polygon, in Edge, Unwinnable. But for those of the listeners who maybe not know you, share a little maybe introduction about who you are and what are some of the things that you've done beyond just this book that you're excited about, proud about, or you would put on a CV or a resume to highlight yourself.
Sure. You're right that I've I've been doing games writing for about 3 years, which is crazy to consider that I effectively got a book deal about 2.5 years into doing this at all. I'm very conscious of how strange and exceptional that is, but I'm very grateful. I primarily write about games, but I've recently been branching out into kind of general personal essays and other forms of criticism. I'm somewhere between general critic and general journalist. I've done like explicit journalism work, like this book, for example, or I did a long reported piece on the casting of Teruyuki Kagawa in Yakuza Kiwami 3, which kind of is I'd say the most important thing I've written for it being reporting wise. And then that led to my review of Yakuza Kiwami 3 for VGC, which has kind of become like the review of that game for a lot of people, which I'm very proud of. I also wrote a review for VGC for Hollow Knight Silksong, which was viral for different reasons. Those being people disagreed with me to say that very, very politely. But yeah, as I say, like I'm still trying to do shit all the time. I've written for Mothership about Metroid recently. I still, have the occasional little piece for Unwinnable, like I reviewed Coffee Talk Tokyo, and I interviewed Sam Eng regarding Skate Story because I was in Brooklyn anyway, and I messaged him and I was like, "Hey, can I go to your studio and interview you?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure, man," which was awesome to just kind of be able to just casually ask, like, the developer of probably my favorite game from last year, if I could just sit down and talk to him. So yeah, as we kind of said, I have not just written this book. It's still the biggest thing that I've done, certainly, and I'm not sure how soon that'll change, if anything will win out over it. But yeah, I'm keeping myself busy and always trying to get better at this craft and not just kind of stagnate.
Yeah, fun. I mean, you have a lot there. A busy 3 years, for sure. So that's really awesome. So I hope that only continues and gets as busy as you want it to get from there. But I'm excited to read the new book. Lost in Colts stuff is just really like the production value, even like the box that they ship their books in are like designed like really well. I was about to say over designed. I don't want it to sound like a negative thing, but they just have really like a lot of really cool attention to detail with like the graphic design work and the visual elements of it all, in addition to like the heart and care they obviously want to put into like all the written elements of it all. But for your book's covering the game Valhalla, the cyberpunk bartender action game. But what normally a book like this, you might just think it's like a documentary style overview of the game, maybe how it came to be, or like a really long form review style like production. But there's always something different with these design works books with Lost in Cold. So they really, it's always taking an interesting look, or like going a little bit deeper, or taking angles that aren't typically being able to being found in just interviews or in talks about its production. But what is this book to you? What are the things that you're proud of being able to cover, and what are like the big like highlighted sections that you have that you put into putting this book together?
I've struggled with like the answer to that for a bit, because I eventually realized there's basically no way of answering a question like that without sounding very proud of myself. And like there's no inherent sin to that, obviously. I'm just, a writer, and therefore being proud of myself is terrifying, and I'm a narcissist, and etc. But Valhalla Design Works, when I was pitching it, or at least like making the design document for it, and then writing it and coming to its finality, the intent behind it was for it to be basically the book on Valhalla. And I know that like that may sound silly of like, I don't think there's another one yet. But what I mean by that is to cover everything I possibly could. Because you're right that a lot of books like this, and this is not an insult, these are incredibly valid like bases to make books on, are primarily just about the development of it, and long form interviews with the team involved and the publishers. And then the story kind of ends at the release, because it's like, well, the game's done. It's out. That's what we wanted to cover. With Design Works, I wanted to go a little bit further than that. So a lot of the book is the development of the game. That is inevitable. The very early on, like submitting a prototype for a game jam, and then that leading into a separate demo, the prologue version, and then the full release later. That is, I would say, maybe 60 to 70% of the book. But with something like Valhalla, with it being, mostly a 2-person project, and being made in Venezuela in the 2010s, something that I realized quite early into planning it out was that it would be essentially irresponsible of me to try to write this book without having the wherewithal to cover external factors that aren't just, opening Ren'Py and Game Maker Studio and making a video game. It is impossible to talk about the development of Valhalla without talking about the politics of Venezuela and the experience of living in Venezuela during the development of it. So one of my favorite chapters in the book goes into essentially the impact of being a indie developer in Venezuela during that time. And I will not, right now go deep into the politics of it all, because that's probably not something you want on this podcast right now. But there's a lot. It is, it wasn't the simplest environment to make a game, to say the least. Mm-hmm. And I was very grateful for the fact that I was able to include this element in the book, because, obviously this book, totally could have just been about the game. But I felt that, the story of Sukeban Games and the way that things panned out for them was so interesting outside of just the kind of, forgive the pun, binary development of just, this is how we made the game. So I'm grateful for having the kind of real world, less romantic, less fun aspects of it in there as well. And also probably my personal favorite part of the book, and something that is funny to consider how it came about. So I was writing this book from about February 2025 to December, say. It was about a year. And I made a design document for it in March, and I stuck relatively close to that during the whole process. Except in, I think, August, I had the thought... So previously, sorry for context, the people that I'd interviewed for the book were Fernando Damas, the writer, Kitty, the designer, and Michael Kelly, the composer. And that was it. It was just those three. And that was like, there were very long interviews. I interviewed Damas for like 5 hours and Kiri for like 4. It was ridiculous. I'm very grateful for all the time they gave me. And I realized in August, I think this game has touched a lot of people and has been impacted by, and thus impacted more than just these three. And I would love to talk to, other people outside of just them, considering that, like, I'm not the only person in the world who Valhalla has changed the life of or been very important to. So I went to Lost in Cult and I said, hey, what if I made more work for myself? And they were like, sure. Are you sure that you can still like deliver everything? Like, can you fit that into your like deadlines and when we want the book done? I was like, yeah, probably. I said, smiling through gritted teeth. So something that turned out to be in the book fairly late in development, but I'm so incredibly glad is in it, is a group of extra interviews with people and studios that are related to Valhalla in some way. So you have like Brian Queck, the CEO of Ysbryd Games, the games publisher. Ren'Py Doll, one of the artists who joined Sukeban Games later and has become core to it. Orahak, a freelance artist who ended up illustrating the cover for the vinyl collection for the game. And other, even Toge Productions, the developers of Coffee Talk, because I thought it'd be fascinating to talk to a studio that was directly inspired by Valhalla. You know, that's like, it's an interesting opportunity to talk about the game itself for an entire book, obviously, and then speak to a different studio later on, hey, I just read a whole book on this game. How did this affect you as well, considering that your game, you know, was drawn from it? That was fascinating. And then something like probably what I would describe as the most surprising part of the book is that when I was speaking to Taku, who is the PR manager for Sukeban Games, and was helping me a lot, like with interviewing Mirange doll, because she's Japanese and I don't yet speak Japanese, so I had that interview translated, which I was very grateful for. Taku said, hey, I can also put you in contact with some bar managers that have either been inspired by Valhalla or have had direct collaborations with Sukeban to make the drinks from the game into a reality and to sell them within their bars. So I ended up interviewing 2 bar managers in Tokyo, which is not something I would have thought would have happened when I started writing this book, but I'm, you know, so grateful for, and it was such a cool opportunity. And then the book closes with a slightly more personal and, I don't know, heart-filled, I suppose, reflection on the effect of this game on people and its effect on me, and kind of what Valhalla means to all these people. And I will not spoil that necessarily, because it is, in my opinion, I think it's weird. It's weird to clarify, like, you know, a best part of the book, so to speak, because obviously it's gargantuan. You know, there's so much to it. But I would say that it was the part of the book that has the most of me as an author in it, which is something that I'm very happy with, and I'm really glad that there is that very personal touch as the kind of denouement to all of the more nonfiction. I suppose, you know, it's, you know what I mean, it's still nonfiction, but the more like journalistic research elements of the rest of the book. So yeah, I mean, I guess that runs down a fair bit of what's in the book.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I think that obviously it sounds like the intentionality and like the personal just like interest to like just make this to be like the best thing it can be to represent what this game not just is as a video game, but as all of the sum of its parts, the influences around it, the craft that went into it, both from the developers, but also from the reaction to how it impacted others, how it even impacted you. Like, I mean, I can imagine how great that final chapter of the book will feel, you know, as a reader, you know, if finding yourself invested in reading and discovering and being excited by this, like that's that payoff to see like that impact and influence it made, you know, post release and after this was all done. So like it's, yes, it as a non-fictional, like, you know, document on like, you know, through conversations and through understanding the development and looking at it through a historical like lens and everything, like that's going to be the very interesting part to read. But like to then know you have like that payoff at the end that brings it home to like feel that personal touch and impact, and realistically, like what a lot of people are sometimes either not confident in talking about or not wanting to, you know, remind others about, you know, but video games being works of art and how art can move and inspire and intimidate and, you know, cause different reactions with people. It's going to be, I think, really cool to be able to read and see like what that reaction and what that impact has been, you know, on you as the author, but also on others that you interview. So that sounds really cool. I mean, I'm very, very excited again, like not just with obviously Lost in Cult being like a really solid publisher and visually designing like amazing works, but like to have these types of written works published by them, like this sounds like it's going to be just another gem in their catalog. So It sounds amazing. Yeah, thank you for giving us that summary of that all. Technically, we were talking about this off mic, but it is coming very soon. So we're recording this in June. By the time this is released, it might be you might be available to just like have that in your hands physically, or not long after. But you can also still pre-order it on the website as well too, just as an FYI for everybody listening. But yeah, actually, that sounds amazing. Like like the amount of work that went into that. I wanted to maybe ask you then, because I'd be curious. I won't say that your process sounds chaotic, but I would maybe like to learn a little bit more about your process, because clearly you had an outline and an idea, part of probably what you pitched for what you wanted to cover in the book. But then to be able to, months into it, like add on that extra like piece, the extra content for it, did that disrupt your outline? Did that cause you to have to like retool some things? Did that like, force you to rewrite any things? Like maybe tell me and tell us, like, what is your like typical writing process for something long form like this? Like, how do you even begin to like start up that mountain? Like, do you start with this outlined idea and then start to write out based on those chapters, or how does that work for you?
I mean, I appreciate the restraint to not say to a podcast guest, wow, this seems really chaotic. But I can tell you, yeah, no, it was really chaotic. Very, very happily, I can say that. Truthfully, when I was approached by Lost in Cult to do this, I was basically asked, like, do you and they meant this like fully, just genuinely, do you think you can do this? And they asked that because this is such a gigantic undertaking in a way that nothing I have done prior has been even remotely similar. I'm trying to think of what the closest thing that I would have done prior would be, and I can't think of anything. Like, going up to a full book, like 2 and a bit years into doing this at all, was a massive change. And I can't tell you that I had, a confident understanding of how I was going to handle this. I was basically fucking around and finding out for an entire year, and it worked out. I don't know. Honestly, sometimes I genuinely just sit and wonder how the hell I managed to write a book, because I still don't know. My actual process, you are correct, was very chaotic. I've pulled up the design document. It's really funny to look at this now because it's mostly accurate, but not quite. The design document was written with an intended order for the book to be written. There's like 14, 15 chapters. And, I wrote those straight out of like, cool, I'm going to write these in sequence. I'm going to start out with the prototype. That makes sense. Then I'll talk about like early there was an internal logic to the design document that had some kind of chronology to the book. And that remains in the final book. That actual intent of linking chapters together and having it make sense and not just be kind of scattered is there. The final book has that. When I was writing it, I wasn't doing that shit at all. I went from writing the early concepts and design inspirations chapter, which is chapter 2, to writing the chapter on Jill next, which is like chapter 7. And then the first thing I wrote, actually, because I knew that it would be one of the shorter and, for me, relatively simpler chapters, was actually on the soundtrack, because I knew that essentially I could take the interview that I'd had with Kelly and, transpose that into a full chapter. And because it was relatively self-contained, that was kind of done as a trial run, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I could send it to my editors and be like, look, this is what the chapters are going to be like. Here's one that I can send to you pretty early. I think I had that chapter done in like March, very soon after I started writing the book. As just like a prototype example of, okay, this is what I'm doing. I just need to do this 14 more times. Nothing big. And so, yeah, I mean, for reasons that are far too much for this podcast, I had a very difficult 2025, and writing a book amidst that was a challenge to undersell it. And I was basically, to be frank, I have never felt imposter syndrome in my life quite like getting about halfway through writing the book, and having some, not just because of the pressure of writing the book, like, again, there was a lot of other shit happening in my life, but having like quite a lot of breakdowns and just being like, this was a mistake. I can't do this. Like, I am not built for the dedication and stability, both in writing and mental health, to put a book together. You can quite happily say, like, well, some of the best writers are mentally ill, and you're right. But also, I'm tired of being mentally ill, and I want to write books anyway. So, all of that gallows humor to say that, like, it was chaotic and it was a struggle, and I unfortunately can't sit here and tell you that, like, oh yeah, it was the smoothest thing ever. I just kind of wrote like to my design document and everything was completely smooth sailing. I made, every deadline. That was all fine. Sorry, no, that's not true. I missed one deadline, and I had to, one deadline for a chapter, and I had to message my project manager and be like, hey, I just got cheated on. I'm gonna be late on this chapter. And he was like, oh my God, I'm sorry. That's fine. Yeah, don't worry about it. Just whatever you can, which was very sweet. Sorry, I'm just reflecting on this, and it's just really funny to consider.
It's got to be an intimidating conversation to have. Like, you have the 100% human empathetic understanding, but you're not trying to put any pressure on. But also, how do you respond to that when trying to help ensure somebody is,
yes,
confident and be able to focus on the task and not have that obvious outside real world life stuff gonna directly impact it. So what's interesting though is that the boring answer would be is if you just opened up a document and organized it all out, bullet pointed it out, and typed it away, and it was all easy. What I've learned now from talking to, this is a newer spin-off thing for me, but you're the fifth writer I've gotten to talk to. Nobody has a one-size-fits-all approach to anything. Every conversation I've been in has been able to, whether that's the imposter syndrome of it, whether that's like the self-doubt, whether that's the just this test of like confidence and questioning and everything that kind of goes through, which I don't know why that is a similar trait like we all share in our own versions of that, but to me, that's what has been really motivating to kind of continue to have these conversations and continue to, talk to other writers about this, is because for someone like me, those were some of the most influential interviews or stories that I'd heard about writers and just the creative processes in general, is hearing about how it's not always done one way and things aren't always perfect in the way that they need to be. But sometimes that chaos, I say that more as a positive thing, but sometimes that can also help uncover and unearth things that will make something wholly better at the end, or those flaws, you may view them as flaws, but when other people see that, they find some really unique beauty in whatever that X, Y, or Z may be. So hearing about everyone's different processes is also so interesting, but I'm also hoping that listeners who are maybe challenging themselves or maybe lacking confidence to maybe push for themselves forward to maybe try and do the thing they want to do, realize that if you're waiting for things to line up perfectly and be easy and have just that simple formula to get it done, that's oftentimes almost never the case. And so how you can kind of persevere through that, even in the face of many challenges inside and outside, can oftentimes just be able to be rewarding enough to allow you to have that momentum to finish against all odds. Sometimes it can feel like, and it's just really cool to hear how people kind of manage through that and work through some of those things. But this sounds intense, the writing process that you went through for this. But how does that feel like when you submitted your final work to it? How did that feel for you? Was that day like a mix of like highs and lows for you, knowing how much went into it and everything that went on with the writing process itself, both in and outside of it?
Something that hit me very hard when I I'd kind of split this a bit. When I submitted the first draft of the finished book, so that this was in December. And it had like a lot of edit passes to go through before it was like actually done. Mm-hmm. I had this, I did have the feeling of just pride and just relief and just like, holy shit, I have written a book that is going to come out, is going to be a physical book. People have terrifyingly already paid for in the hundreds. And it's done. I spent a year on this. I'll action edits. There's still a little bit of work to do, but for the most part, this project, this insane thing, that I didn't think I would ever do, is done. And initially, on first submission of first draft, it was that feeling. I just sat there and I just like cried. Honestly, I genuinely just like cried for an entire evening of just like just disbelief, really. Mm-hmm. And then when it came to January, February, around the start of the year, was when I had actioned the edits and the book was like, okay, now it's actually done on your part. And it went off to design and then production, etc. All stuff that is mostly out of my hands. Also, I would like to just, to give full credit, the designers of this book, Tim and Rachel, have done such an incredible job. This book is gorgeous. I can't believe my writing is housed within such a pretty goddamn printed book. It looks incredible. I'm so grateful. Tim was wonderful to work with. I was closer to Tim than Rachel, and he just did such an amazing job and was so communicative with like giving me input on his design and making sure that we were aligned on what we wanted. It was just a wonderful working environment, truly. Same with my editors, same with my project manager. Just working for Lost in Cult was really good. But what I was getting to was when I was done with my part, and it was just off to Tim and off to design. I did have this feeling. I don't know if you've watched Tick Tick Boom at any point, but one of the like later scenes of that film, after Jonathan Larson puts on his play, the thing that he's been centering his life around for years and writing and trying to put together and getting cast members and getting production and getting money, he puts it on and then calls an agent about it and asks like, what do I do next? Like I've done it. Like I put on my show. Like this is what my life has been about for so long. And she just very calmly tells him, you start working on the next one. And, he's just in complete disbelief because he's like, I just spent so long doing this. What do you mean just start doing something else? And that precise feeling hit me very hard after I realized that my part was done. Because I realized, like we said earlier, like I couldn't just rest on my laurels. I had to keep doing shit. And it was frankly very difficult to feel like, it's not a great way of looking at it. And I'm conscious of that. And I'm trying to like fix this internally. But I had this feeling of like, well, how the hell am I going to top a book? What the hell am I going to do now? Like, I've just spent a year on a book. I can't top that, like, what am I even doing if I can't, everything has to be in my head, and it's a bad thing, but like everything in my head has to keep being better than the last thing. Otherwise there's no point. And that's wrong. And I know that's wrong, but that's just, one of many writing neuroses that I have. And so I kept doing things, I kept like writing reviews. I kept writing features. I kept pitching. I kept, even when I was writing the book, I still did other shit. I ended up publishing a bunch of other articles. The cargo piece that I mentioned earlier was published in October 2025, which was while I was still writing the book. I apparently writing a book wasn't enough work for myself, so I gave myself more. But yeah, when it was done, I did have, and I still have it, frankly. It hasn't really gone away. This feeling of just like, what am I going to do when the book is out? And, I have to top that somehow. And I know, like, I can say to you right now with, an entirely, just not confident, but like, stable mind. Well, I don't need to do that. That's silly. I don't need to try and top a book. I can just do the coolest thing I've ever done last year. And I can just keep doing things that aren't a book, but are still impressive. Like the Kiwami 3 review, like interviewing Sameng, like, a bunch of cool shit that I've done. But I don't know. It's frankly really hard not to feel that. Yeah. I wrote what I think is my best work ever. My best, like, paid published work so far, at least. Which is the personal essay, No Good Options on Stop Caring, which came out in January. That is incredible. I think that is my best writing. And I remember having this really awful thought a little bit after it came out of, yeah, but I mean, it's not like a book, is it? Like, this is really impressive writing. This is really good. But, you're writing this right after finishing a book. You gotta step it up. You gotta do something more impressive. And I don't know when that feeling goes away, really, because it hasn't yet. The book's about to be out, and it's going to be a really interesting turning point for me mentally as to if that feeling gets worse or better when I have it in my hands. Like maybe this, abstract worry will lessen slightly because I'll be able to hold the thing that I'm literally holding to such a high standard in my brain, and feel some kind of closure because it's like fully, truly done. It is in my hands. Or alternatively, and hopefully not, I'll hold it in my hands and that will intensify and I will feel like shit. This really is the best thing I've ever done and I'm never going to top this. And I don't have an answer for that. I don't know how that's going to go. It's a strange feeling to have because prior to it, I did have this general feeling of I need everything I write to be better than the last, and I was mostly managing to do that. Every time I wrote something new, I would at the very least feel like, okay, this is one of the best things I've written. I'd feel like consistent progress in that sense. The book has been done on my end since very early this year, and I still have this feeling. So I don't think this is limited to me. I think this is quite a common feeling when you put your soul and blood, sweat, and tears and a year into something, and then you have to keep doing smaller projects as well to keep afloat and stay relevant. But I haven't figured out how to manage it yet, and I hope, if anyone else feels the same, or if anyone else has felt the same and has got past it, I'm hoping I can figure that out at some point, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, that is the challenge. It's what's interesting is that, no one's going to be able to help you solve that for you or anything. It's just how you are going to be able to process. Like, I can only imagine, like, that the holding the final book in your hands, the live, like, what's available to order and what's going to be on other people's shelves. Like, that's either going to be that chance to like confront and like end it and be like, great, I did this. It is done. Now I can move on because I physically see this here and this is good. Or it's going to be that continuing that long tail shadow of that intimidation of like, you've got to like outdo this, unfairly. I think that is the combination of that, not just like creative mind, but like, the self-driven, self-motivated, like self-intense, like mind as well too. So like, I don't think it's a bad thing to want the next thing you do to always be better than the last. I think maybe what might help is if that's the intent, like, hey, my goal is for this to be better of the last, but I can also be okay if this isn't, as long as I'm setting a bar for myself, that's fine. But I need to allow to give myself grace to know that if it doesn't clear it, that's fine. But I'm still at least always striving to start that, because you never know how somebody else is going to read or respond to it. Somebody else may read or respond to whatever that thing is and think it is better than that last thing. It's just going to be your personal feeling of that. And maybe that helps you navigate through that space. But regardless, it sounds like a really, highly invested, highly involved, but highly passionately done like project. And I am personally very excited to be able to like read and see the final copy of that. And I'm sure a lot of folks are as well. And I think with a game of this scale, it obviously was a hit. It's not a complete unknown. It wasn't a flop by any means whatsoever. But still, the scale that this game is, like, this is going to be in a rad way. It is going to be the definitive like version and book of being able to kind of document and see. Like, there aren't others out there, and I think that's also kind of a rad and cool thing to know about and think about. What, as people out there are looking to like discover the game and find the game later, they'll maybe be able to come across the book as well. And it's going to be your book they find, not one of 15 other books about Super Mario Brothers or the origins of the NES or something like that. They're only going to find yours. And I think that could be kind of cool. One thing I like to do when we wrap, this is my interesting segue to get us to wrap somehow after that really rad and heavy and inspiring and like honest look at your mindset as you went into all this. And again, thank you so much for sharing and talking that through. And I really do hope people listening to this like can see and understand that maybe this can be motivation in yourself to know that it's okay to feel these things, but it's also okay to be proud of and accomplished and excited by all the stuff that you do. And all these things, ups and downs, are all part of it. And it's just about how you maintain that ride yourself that can help see you persevere through a lot of the things you want to accomplish. But the last things I like to do is like plugs or recommendations. So kind of like in the lens of like you as, over the last few years of being a writer, like what were the things that maybe inspired you to even want to like tackle and take on this book project? Were there other books you've read with a similar feel, or were there books that you read that you were inspired by, like, wow, I love this, but I'd love to know even more, X, Y, or Z that helped inspire you? But are there things maybe you'd love to shout out, put a spotlight on, recommend or share, or just give a little platform to that have been in your orbit?
Am I limited to books when I say this?
No, sorry. I should be. Yeah. Anything, everything
Perfect.
out there
No,
in the ether.
I to check.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I don't know how much this will necessarily mean to people who aren't quite as invested in the games media space as I currently am, due to my field, my work, etc. But games media is going through a pretty hard time for various reasons, mainly venture capitalists, and there is this feeling amongst a lot of people, both in and out of the industry. This is both inside baseball and also just people looking into it, that games media isn't doing super well, and I will withhold my thoughts on that in general. But what I do want to say is that I think games media is alive and well and beautiful and doing really interesting shit on small indie sites. So what I would like to shout out is just kind of various small, publications and blogs and groups. So, if you want really good games writing, you don't have to go to the sites you've heard about for 10 years. You can, and by no means am I letting them down, because there is still some really, really good shit being published on like Kotaku and Polygon. Especially Kotaku. The change in leadership at Kotaku has been wonderful to see. But, look at Stop Caring, look at Unwinnable, look at Deleted Saves, look at Mothership, look at Design Room, look at like Inner Spiral, look at Bullet Points, look at Deep Hell. Like, what, I give those as examples, but just generally, I implore people to make an effort to look for good games writing, because it exists. It is very accessible, and it is primarily on smaller sites at this point. And to make that easier, actually, I would like to specifically guide people to Critical Distance, which is an indie site that not only, does like yearly roundups of the best games writing of the year, but more relevant to this point, publishes weekly roundups of some of the best games writing from that week. And you can get this like a Sunday paper, basically, and you can get like a digest of all the good shit that has been posted in the past week. So if people feel like, games media is kind of, floundering a little bit, and I don't know what, Critical Distance's literal tagline is, "Where's all the good writing about games?" Start there. Read some really good shit from the past week and previous weeks and previous months and previous years. And then, use your RSS feed, subscribe to these small places, whether you can monetarily support them or just, subscribing to them as if a newsletter. And yeah, I basically just want to say that like good games writing absolutely exists. You don't have to look far for it. You just have to look a little bit further than what might show up on your like Google recommended newsfeed or something. So the individual sites that I called out, like, Unwinnable, Stop Caring, etc., but also just look on Critical Distance and see what you like and go from there. It's kind of, I view games media in its current state kind of like gods that will fade if people don't believe in them. Like if people start thinking en masse that games media is dead already, then yeah, it'll die. But, like it very much still exists. You just have to look for it a little bit more. So that is my, optimistic wish that games media is doing well games media is doing well, asterisk, in certain specific places that you might have to look a little bit more to find.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah, the way I feel about it, it's like the giant, few like landmark sources and all that stuff, have obviously, with the way the venture capitalists and money and everything trying to get out of it has ruined things. It's not that it's gone. It just feels like it's more decentralized, and that has its pros and cons. It's like a new way, and it's kind of an evolved way, but like the folks who still want to write those amazing things are still writing them. And to your point, like it is just about finding them. There's a little bit extra legwork involved, but when you have creative people like that, like Critical Distance, who's going to organize them a way to help you in that space, like that in itself is a huge effort and endeavor that goes a long way and helps you find those types of things. So they're still out there. It's just in a decentralized way and everything. So it is a optimistic, way to look at the way things are. Yes, it is different, and it is scary, and it is, like it's forcibly put onto the industry, but it is not necessarily a bad thing going forward. But yes.
I am just real quick as a final statement. I don't think we can let venture capitalists win. And I do think that there is actual power to be held in supporting independent media, independent sites, and proving that there is a audience and demand for this. And sometimes, there is a risk of independent games media falling into like trading the same $5 around between everyone. because everyone's broke and it's difficult to support as many as you can. But support who you can, support who you like most. And, you know, if you have the spare money, throw it at a bunch of places. But if you can support just one indie site that you really like, you are making a huge difference, not only to the single person or few people running that site, but also to the general state of games media. And that is not something that should be downplayed. That is very important.
Yes, that's awesome.
That's all I got. That's my manifesto.
No, that's awesome. And like, just, you know, give and support how you can, you know, like same thing, like you yourself may be like broke and unable to do that. And if you can't financially like support one of these things, like the word of mouth, like the praise, the recommendation, the spotlight, the sharing of links, all those types of things, those can also help and be something that you can do if you feel like you don't have the option to financially support others. I think it is that word of mouth. You are in the ocean of the internet and everything, and so it's hard for maybe some sources to like find eyes on their things. And yes, if you can financially support them, great. But if not, at least sharing that out could also be potentially even more valuable than that, because it might get in front of like others who can. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive, but there's plenty of great things to read. And one of those next things you can read will be Valhalla Design Works, coming very, very, very soon from this. I did a really good job of that segue to plug this back in together and wrap it up. Segue. Gosh, that's so good. I'm not going to edit this boasting out either. This is going to stay in the recording. But thank you, Ashley. This was really fun talking with you. Like, honestly, like every conversation I have with another writer, it's just more and more inspiring to me as somebody who's I have this self-doubt of even just calling myself a writer, but it's inspiring to me, and I hope people who are listening also feel inspired as well to know that it's always done in a different way, and just to, you know, find your path, you know that things are going to get tough at points, but like, you know, if you have that passion, you have that drive, like just keep pushing through, and, you know, make the obstacles not stops, but make them just speed bumps along the way. But thank you so much for talking, because it does help inspire me significantly, and I'm hoping it does the same for others. But I'd love to follow up once the book's all done and see how you are excited and what that next thing is, you know, whatever it may become. Like, I'm very excited to read those next projects from you as well too. So thank you so much for your time. I will have links in the show notes below to like the Lost in Cult page, but also plug a lot of those recommendations, all the sites I can organize and gather there. I'll plug those down there as well. So if y'all want to check those things out, look at the show notes below. But otherwise, come back next week for another new episode. And that's all I got. Ashley, thank you.
Thank you for having me on.